Welcome. I just want to say I know John. I work with John and Dylan and had the pleasure of working with Sandra last year at this conference in a panel. And Tom and I are well connected. I've known him for a few years. He was a student of mine, 7 of my courses over there. Crazy enough, right?
Was it that
And
many, really?
yeah, it was that many,
Wow.
including field. So as far as that is, and now that you're graduating, you're working, you're doing the work as a social worker. Um, so and I consider Tom now a friend. So it's so we do presentations like this a lot. So getting started with the topic of today, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start by going through some slides and try to get through them fairly quickly, but also meaningfully. And then we're going to go into a panel discussion and try to keep it a discussion, but also just people you want to giving you a sense of who everyone is based upon the topic of this panel. So here we go. All right. Vets are not a monolith. We're going to get into that. So we are Sandra, John, Kamal, Dylan, Tom are in the room. So for the audience, I want to ask you to, I want to get rid of this thing. So take a few seconds to picture a veteran in your mind without putting much thought into it. Take note of what comes to mind first in terms of how you envision their physical appearance and mannerisms. Sorry. So chances are some of you imagined a male, maybe white and a bit older, wearing a cap with military image or slogan stitched across it. Some might picture someone who presents as tough, stoic, hardened, or weathered, silently struggling with trauma or even appearing destitute. Maybe even imagine that every veteran looks, thinks, and acts the same. Well, the fact is, we are not all the same because veterans have a diverse range of life experiences, including within the military. Veterans possess a spectrum of social identities in terms of gender, ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, religion, age, ability, and more. Veterans come from a gamut of socioeconomic classes within urban, rural, and suburban communities. And most branches of the military, except the Marine Corps, have an overall higher representation of racial minorities in the U.S. population. Over 2 million U.S. veterans are women, and that number is growing. By 2040, women are expected to make up 18% of the total veteran population. We also have varying political beliefs and worldviews. And importantly, we are unique individuals as well. So veterans have varied military experiences based on rank, branch, training, vocation, deployments, missions, units, duty stations, chains of command, hardships, and more. To keep moving this little thing out of the way. We join the military for one or a number of reasons, which commonly include a sense of duty and patriotism, to fulfill a family legacy, for a paid job that also comes with healthcare, housing, meals, and travel, to obtain education and other benefits, feelings of aimlessness, structure and discipline, to escape certain social and economic conditions, family hardships, or other difficult circumstances. Again, there can be more, but those are common ones or a combination of some of those. So, fun facts about military rank and class. The military is comprised of enlisted and officer ranks. Enlisted personnel are the backbone of the military, who make up 80% of the armed forces and are responsible for carrying out orders and executing military missions. The remaining 18% are officers who function as managers within the military and therefore are responsible for planning missions, giving orders, and assigning tasks to enlisted personnel. Simply, enlisted ranks are the working class of the military, and officers are management. The class differences, or we can say divisions, of those who occupy these differentiated rank systems largely reflect those within U.S. society. Combat specialty occupations account for approximately 20% of military jobs. Sorry.
You're just
Examples
practicing, right,
include,
Tim?
what's that?
Are you practicing or are we starting? Because we don't have, we didn't press record.
I'm going, we started. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, please go. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So combat specialty occupations account for approximately 20% of military jobs. Examples include infantry, special operation forces, artillery, armor, combat engineers, attack helicopters, combat medics, air defense forces, and more. Approximately 15% of all military personnel serve in the infantry, both Army and Marines, which is the primary land combat force that is responsible for seeking out, engaging, and eliminating enemy forces. These include light infantry, such as airborne, air assault, mountain, rangers, scouts, recon, as well as motorized, mechanized, which are examples Stryker and Bradley. The infantry is differentiated from, yet can extend into special operations and counterterrorism units, which comprise roughly 3.5% of all military personnel. And again, there's a list of special operations types. Thus, 80% of military personnel are in combat jobs, or in non-combat jobs, I should say. So that's the majority of people who are in non-combat jobs, which include mechanics, engineering, science, technical software, human resources, healthcare, linguistics, finance, accounting, legal affairs, maintenance, supply, transportation, construction, logistics, law enforcement, MPs, firefighting, intelligence, public affairs, and more. These jobs enable and support the lethal mission of combat specialty personnel. So, a bit of myth busting. Roughly 40% of those who join the military never get deployed to a combat zone. Only 10 to 20% of those who are deployed end up in a combat zone. This is not 10 to 20% of the total, just 10 to 20% of the 60% who get deployed. Most of the troops who do end up in combat zones do not actually engage in combat against the enemy. Again, they are support troops whose jobs are intended to back up combat arms troops. Ultimately, only about 1 out of every 10 military personnel, 10% overall, engage in direct combat as what we call trigger pullers. Now that can get complicated because in the type of wars and deployments and stuff, a lot of people who are non-combat personnel can find themselves in harm's way and do, and especially in the age of the war on terror, but it was also in every war, really. Ongoing challenges. Approximately 1% of the US population now serves in the military. Veterans currently represent around 6% of the adult population in the United States. Now, I was looking up, these are numbers that are used by a number of veteran advocacy organizations, and doing the calculations also of the 1%, and that's just basically looking what is the latest statistics and numbers of those who are currently serving in the military, compared to the census of the U.S., the number of people in the U.S. population. It's actually less than 1%. So those are very important numbers too. Therefore, it is no surprise that 71% of civilians admit they know little about the strengths and real challenges military members and veterans face. Alternatively, 84% of post 9/11 veterans feel the public doesn't understand them. So again, there's an alienation that people are, it's common for veterans to feel alienated from the rest of the US population. So veterans are too often reduced to trauma, treated like liabilities, and misrepresented by media and society. 67% of Americans believe most veterans have PTSD, which is a damaging myth that fuels stigma and silence. It's not true. It's the real percentages can vary depending upon the sources, but it's much lower. 80% of Americans falsely believe most veterans suffer from severe mental illness. This misconception feeds fear, not support. 44% of employers don't believe veterans have the right to have the right experience, which blocks opportunities before they begin. So there's built-in prejudices and discrimination against, and that's commonly why we're also considered a protected category. As such, service members and veterans live in a nation they are largely invisible or strangers to the majority of the population. Sorry, I got to get this out of the way. So, live in the nation in which they are largely invisible or strangers to the majority of the population, who subsequently rely on dehumanizing myths and stereotypes generated by news outlets, TV shows, and movies that too often portray service members and veterans as valiant heroes, callous killers, or ticking time bombs. We've all seen those movies and shows, and so while there are exceptions, our humanity is too often ignored, distorted, and dramatized and exploited to serve as entertainment or entertaining and profit-generating plot twists that shape public perception. Ultimately, veterans are too often othered, rhetorically honored for political purpose, and systematically labeled as a population composed of deeply damaged bodies, minds, and souls. Thus, we're commonly patronized, commodified, stigmatized, pathologized, and forsaken. Simply, when veterans are treated as a monolith, the breadth of their humanity is effectively erased. So coming back to that point, I do have references for all these, just so you know. I just didn't do in-text citations. So coming in, talking to our panelists, can you all see each other right now with this up?
Along the top, I can see everybody.
Okay, I'm going to change my theme so I can see people. Okay, so Sandra, do you want to go through these questions and tell us about
Sure.
yourself? But hold on one sec. I'm jumping ahead of myself. This one.
Okay. Okay, where'd I grow up? I grew up in Western New York, city of Buffalo, and area was very communal, very close knit. Majority of people there owned their homes. My grandmother owned her home, and we lived upstairs over her. And community was what actually shaped my my life, because the old saying was, you can't beat the telephone home. So if you did something wrong, anybody within the neighborhood or community could correct you, and then also call your parents and let them know what you did. And then if my parents felt that it was not substantial enough, then they corrected me.
Mm-hmm.
And my family was kind of sort of that block where I live was unique, because we were all full families. I grew up with my father. We had whole family activities. Whereas, unfortunately, stereotypical, you look at me, you think of people of color, it's the father's missing, single mother. That was not my lifestyle. And only thing that separated our families and their marriages was death. Someone passed away. Other than that, that was it. And my father's extended family all lived within a 2-mile radius of my grandmother. My grandfather had died earlier of black lung, but we had a very strong family community and the whole 9 yards. And ironically, there was a little white church on the corner, even though I was an observant Jew. So go figure. So
Hmm.
that's my demographics.
Did many people you know growing up join the military?
Well, in my family, my father was Air Force. I had 2 uncles that were airborne, one with the 75th Ranger Battalion, and I had 3 Marines and 1 Navy.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mhm.
John, you're up. I love John's history too. He
Sorry
tells
about
us-
that.
Yeah.
Morning, everybody. So my name's John. I grew up on the Lower East Side in New York City and attended public school. So when people talk about a melting pot, basically 14th Street, 2nd Avenue was that. It was black, white, Hispanic, Chinese, Asian, Jewish, you name it, we had it. And sort of like what Sandra said, but back then the police could bring you home, which they did a couple of times, after giving you a swift kick in the butt. And again, if your family didn't think that was sufficient, then they took it upon themselves to continue that. I grew up uniquely in a household of 2 women, 1 black, 1 white, and nobody in my family were police officers, which is what I ended up doing 1980. And nobody really was pro-military, flags hanging out. My great uncle was in the Lafayette Escadrille during World War I as an aerial photographer doing reconnaissance. My father-in-law was part of Patton's Third Army, blown up at the Battle of Metz, and my father served in the Pacific as a pharmacist mate. But it was never anything, proactive in my family, as being, you were going to follow in the footsteps of your family. I went public school, educated, went to NYU briefly until we both decided this was not a good fit for me, and left, and ended up becoming a police officer. And then that led to me being after I retired, just before 9/11, I became a nurse. Did that for 15 years, became a trauma burn nurse. And it was that skill set that had the Army decide that I might be able to fit in there. So that was the reason why I joined the military. And then a veterans program and a few other things. But I grew up in the city, and nobody in my family was really in the military, or didn't stand out. We didn't have memorials or anything of that nature.
And tell people what you do now.
I'm a county coroner. I used to run a veterans outreach program called the Joseph P. Dwyer Vet to Vet program in Putnam County. I did that for 10 years. So I think if you list all of them, it's police, nursing for 15, the Army for 9, and then veterans program for 10, and I've been a coroner for 10 years. So I see dead people. They don't want to let me put that on my business card for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's funny.
Yeah, when you see people, when you see people just generally in life, do you also see them like, oh, dead people? They're going to be dead people.
Yes, eventually. I mean, it has, though. I will say one thing: the experience when you're dealing with a family. We just had a suicide the other day.
Yeah.
You're dealing with family, and I think it's that previous 40-something odd years of dealing with people that are dealing with violence and death in their family that gives you a certain ability or humility to be able to interact with them and sort of understand what they're going through, and then sort of help them walk through this path, whether or not it's military or police or anything. Yeah.
Okay. And what are your personal interests? What do you like to do when you're not doing all this other stuff?
Well, I just became a grandfather, so that's becoming entertaining. But I have a motorcycle. I ride a motorcycle. I go fly fishing. I got a lake, so I go boating. And for some reason, I also decided to get a part-time job at Orvis, which, if you know anything about Orvis, they have fly fishing, shotguns, sporting clays, the whole 9 yards. And I went to one of their stores and I said, geez, can I live here? And they were like, no, but we'll give you a job. And I said, yippee, okay, hey, man, I'll do it. Let me take this. So I do that once a week as well.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Dylan, you're up.
Do I have to be?
You don't have to be. You can pass if you want, but you got to jump in at some point.
Fair enough. Do you just want me to take it from the top?
Yeah, you take it from the top and add whatever else you want about yourself. Just who you are.
Well, hi everyone. My name's Dylan Damboise. I was a United States Marine. I grew up on Long Island, New York, pretty much just the extended suburbs of New York City. It doesn't get more East Coast than that. In terms of like impacts from my family and like my history before joining the military, it was poor. It was like basic white suburbia poor. Parents divorced when I was about 10, bounced in between their households, bounced between school systems because of consistent moving, people looking for jobs, and was really not sure what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I wasn't wonderful academically. I didn't feel greatly empowered by my family. And at one point, um, Melanie, who was my girlfriend at the time, now wife, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do, and the idea popped into our heads like, well, maybe we can join the military and it can give us structure, pay, and we can figure out what we're going to do for the rest of our life. And the original idea was to do like anything but the Marine Corps. In fact, laughably enough, the Marine Corps was like stock bottom of the list. But for the love of God, neither of us could find the Coast Guard number. So we were going to go to the Army recruiter, and the Army recruiter was directly next door to the Marine Corps recruiter, and we couldn't see the Army recruiter, so we talked to the Marine Corps recruiter, and the Marine Corps recruiter was just like, look, I get it. Just let me talk to you 10 minutes. And if you don't like the pitch, I'll just give you the Coast Guard number. And I was like, all right, fair enough. 10 minutes later, and he was just like, look, it seems like you really just want to find trajectory in your life and figure out what you're good at. Marine Corps can do that for you. And ironically enough, for as painful as it was, he wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
And 4 years later, I left the Marine Corps, physically fine, but emotionally battered and bruised.
Yeah.
And I re-entered education, discovered I was still not good at education because I had no idea what I was doing. And then I found myself going into legal work. And I found the legal work restorative. I discovered I'm good at it. I like problem solving. And as I started working with legal work as a paralegal. And yes, Mary, I was married when I left. Melanie and I got married in the service. But the legal work and Melanie's advocacy work, I found restorative in a way that time out of the military was not. And I realized I liked solving problems and I liked helping people. And after 2 years of being a paralegal, I talked to my boss, Jared, really wonderful individual, huge advocate for veterans. He literally had me working in his department on helping veterans get their disability benefits. And he said, like, Dylan, what do you want to do? I was like, I was really thinking about eventually going back to school because I can get law school paid for. And he's like, Dylan, what are you telling me you can get law school paid for? Why are you here? And so I am now getting my bachelor's in organizational leadership and moving on to law school. My hobbies consist of doing generalized nerd stuff, painting models, playing D&D, and the things I happen to be interested is learning laws and hating how people write laws and hating how they implement laws and writing hot takes about how much I hate said laws and why.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So yeah, and I'm surprised you didn't throw gamer in there too, but
I
that's
mean, I am. I
okay.
just all under the
Yeah,
auspice
yeah.
of nerd.
Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate all that. Kamal, you're up. Tell us about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kamal Sabra. I'm a Navy veteran. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. My mother's Puerto Rican. My father's Arabic, Lebanese, Palestinian. My mother was a Navy veteran. Her brother was a Army veteran paratrooper. So I did have some military in my family. And that was kind of the inspiration for me to join. I didn't want to join out of a patriotic duty. I kind of joined just to get out of Brooklyn. I used to cut school a lot, getting in trouble growing up in Brooklyn. And that was an option. It really wasn't an option. My mother grabbed me by one ear and my uncle kicked me in the butt on the way to the recruiter. I joined, and similarly, the Marines and the Navy recruiter were right next to each other. And I went into the Marines, and they wouldn't take me because I had some open court cases and drug charges. This was right before, this was prior to 9/11 in 2000. But the Navy recruiter said, I'll take you. I'll go with you to court. And he actually came with me to court and sorted everything out. And before you knew it, I was in boot camp in February of 01, right before 9/11. So I was deployed for that, which was interesting being an Arab in the military at that point.
Sure. Yeah, and certainly get into more of that in the next section. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I would, after getting out the military, I got my GED in boot camp. And yeah, I worked out. When I came out, I used my GI Bill, went to college after a few years of just adjusting, because I got out of I got injured and I got out. I didn't plan to get out. So I had to adjust back. So my first few years in Brooklyn, I just really didn't know what to do. I was drinking a lot. But I did go to college. I used my GI Bill. Currently, I'm an MRI tech. I worked in Beth Israel for 10 years. I think John said he grew up around there. They just closed about a couple of weeks ago. So currently, I'm an MRI tech. And my personal hobbies, martial arts. I like to do Legos and stuff like that. I like to help veterans, substance abuse and stuff like that, wherever I can.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess I'll add on later.
Yeah.
Unless
Thank
you
you.
have any.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Tom.
Last but not least, the outcast of the group. I'm not from New York at all. I'm from the suburbs of Connecticut, so I hope I'm still welcome here. Had working class parents my whole life. They had us live a middle class lifestyle. Politics weren't much of an influence until later in my life. My mom was completely apolitical, and my dad's political views weren't really known to me until later in life. And turns out he was a libertarian. I am a high school graduate. I graduated in June of 2001. So pretty obvious what happened after that. After the Army, I spent 10 years working plumbing and drain cleaning with Roto-Rooter. I was let go from there thanks to some differences in ethical opinions, and so I made a pivot to social work. Now I hold an associate's degree in human services and a bachelor's degree in social work. Some personal interests and hobbies. I enjoy watching movies and reading books. I enjoy anything which can expand my knowledge of the world. So nonfiction and documentaries are great, but don't get me wrong, I do love to be entertained. So some of the wonderful Hollywood blockbusters can get me anytime too. I need to get back to my roots though, more in the woods with hiking and camping and fishing, like John was saying. A lot of the John stuff, I need to get back into that stuff because I miss it. I used to love doing those. And of course, I got my family, so I love to spend time with my kids and my girlfriend.
Yeah. And he's also a metalhead, right? So that's
Big metalhead, love metal. Listen
Yeah.
to it, reading about it.
yeah, it's true. Sandra,
Very
you have
true.
a hand up.
Yes, I do, because I laugh at, I took your upper to be specific and it says mentioning anything about, without mentioning anything about your military service. I skipped right over that. Everybody else jumped in with their military service, and I stopped and didn't
Well,
mention my education or my personal hobbies because for some reason I thought we were going to go line by line
yeah,
with people speaking, not
yeah.
the running through. And so I would like, if okay, to share the educational portion of it because I did stop short because I misunderstood what I read because I was trying to adhere to the letter of what
Yeah.
it said.
And that's fine. There's no hard rules in this.
Okay.
And the next slide, we're going to go deeper into our military experiences. But please fill in the gaps with this with your education.
Okay, when it comes to my education, I have a Regents diploma in industrial chemistry. I have my degree both in Judaic studies and also biotechnology. And I'm just a perpetual learner to where I even have certification in plant medicine and things like that. And my personal interests and hobbies is I love to cook and I do photography. And I volunteer as a literacy coach and do after school programs in the inner city, pushing a lot of the cultural history that I knew of growing up to try to be role models for the kids to want to lift their heads and understand that the only limitations they have are that they put on themselves.
Mm. Yep. Thank you. Thank you for all that. And it's so there's certainly a trend here and a theme around a lot. While there's differences ethnically, racially, and culturally, you know, that's we're all, you know, all of you, including myself, come from you know, we can however you classify from poor, working class, maybe middle class backgrounds. I hear more working class, right?
Mhm.
As far as our family backgrounds, that we all share that. And education, you know, obtaining kind of higher education was not something that was very much in our family histories, but became, you know, important to us in, you know, in our lives. I'm a first generation college graduate as myself, high school dropout parents, got their GEDs, stuff like that. But I'm really off course here, right? I'm from Ogden, northern Utah, Ogden, Utah. So that, you know, I'm from another planet. Fifth generation Mormon settlers. And so, you know, I think that, but with that, John, I did live in New York City for about a decade, and you know, my first place I lived right there on Second Avenue and 14th Street. So I can picture it, but not back in your day. So all right, thank you all, and let's jump into the military history. And some of you already covered this, and that's fine, but how about starting with you in this, John? You want to go a little bit deeper into your military history of when you were serving?
So you have to understand, I started life, you know, a lot of the things that you said earlier about, you know, medical plans and stuff. That's the reason I joined the police department. They had a good dental plan. You know, nobody in my family were cops, brought home by cops. I'd been arrested as a kid. But I ended up joining the police department, did that for 20 years. I was a homicide detective. And my life is prior to 9/11. And so the world didn't need another security guard or anything of that nature at that time. And I decided to go into nursing, figuring there was something I could do. And then 2 months later, I lost about 5 friends. And as you know, 9/11 happened. We lost 3,000 people. And that changed my life. And, you know, half of my team was working that day, lost a few friends that day. And it was part of the thing is that I should have been there. And I ended up becoming a nurse. I became a certified emergency room nurse, certified ICU nurse. I did neonatal advanced trauma life support, pediatric life support, did all that happy stuff. And one day I meet a nurse recruiter for the Army. And I had always been praying that, you know, I mean, wars were going on at that time. Iraq was going on at that time. Afghanistan was going on at that time. I didn't think the world needed another cop in the military because I didn't want to be an MP. And I ended up going into the Army Reserves, which is primarily who does medicine in war, is the Army Reserves. Think of MASH, think of anything else. You know, my OIC ran an 85-bed level 1 trauma center. Army doesn't have that. We created it while we were in Iraq. So one day I end up raising my right hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And the next thing you know, within a few months, I'm standing on an LZ in an emergency room in the middle of Iraq. And the main reason I did it was, one, I was not at 9/11 when I should have been. And two, I saw a lot of young men who left their jobs to join the military because of 9/11. And I had a skill set that very few people had. You have to also understand, I joined the Army at 50.
Right.
I'm 69. So my lifestyle has been a little longer than that. But, I transferred to the Army Reserves. I went as a second lieutenant, which if anybody who's in the military knows, as an officer, sergeants do the work. Officers, I don't work for a living, but a butter bar, which is a second lieutenant, is probably the lowest rank in the entire military. You're not even given anything of responsibility. But I eventually left as a captain, running an I was the OIC of an ICU in a combat support hospital. And during my military career, I went to Balad, which was the busiest trauma center in the world at that time. Went through 3 mass casualty events. If you've never been through one of those things, it's a hoot. You have to think of mass destruction, 30 to 40 people that are critical, level 1 traumas, arriving within 10 minutes and having a fully functional hospital dealing with it. Not too many people can do that in the world, and the United States military does it. And it did it more often than, unfortunately. It was 16-hour days, 6 days a week. You got 1 day off to sleep, basically. And like I said, it was some of the finest people I've ever met in my entire life. Whether they were young, older, didn't make a difference what their race was, who they were. Everybody was there doing the same thing. You've got regular Army, and then you've got a medical unit. It's like herding cats. But you run into an 18-year-old who's in the reserves, who is responsible for moving combat casualties out of theater. And that's his job. And if he doesn't do it right, a lot of bad things can happen. And yet here's a 19-year-old, specialist who's being able to do this. And a lot of people don't realize the responsibility that young man, men and women, had. And again, it's not a trigger puller. You're not on the front lines. But without that guy in the pad office, my casualties aren't moving. And, I've got to move my casualties because I got to move my beds, because I got to keep my ICU open. I got to keep my ER open, because that's what it was. And you're relying on a 19-year-old. And you look at that and you're just like amazed. I mean, I was amazed at the people that I had working with me, and I'll never forget them. And, sometimes you'll run into young men and women, and, in the normal world, they're firemen or whatever in the United States, and they're working for UPS. And the next thing you know, they're standing in a room with 30 people screaming and yelling because they've been burned up, blown, whatever. And they're keeping their cool. They're doing their job, and they got their head down. And again, you look around and you're going like, this is absolutely amazing that people are doing this all the time.
Yeah.
And nobody knows it. But again, that was probably one of the most things that I found amazing about the military, was the wide variety of people that were there who did that shit, knew their shit, and did it day in and day out without anybody patting them on the back. So that was my military experience. And then I had to resign my commission because I was too old. I couldn't retire from the military.
Oh, you're forced out.
I was forced out. I had to send a letter to the president. Thanks for letting me play in the sandbox. But it's time for me to go. I was supposed to go to Afghanistan too, but somewhere along the line, the president changed it from being a war to, I don't know, circus or something. Our transfer to Afghanistan was canceled. But
Okay. Again, with all of yours, and just starting with yours to unpack some of this too, is that, it's very unique experience of, not only when you go in, and having a full life history, but age 50. And it sounds like you were really compelled by what we often refer to, and can happen in various ways, survivor guilt of that's how I read part of what you were saying about what compelled you.
absolutely. Well, it took me 10 years to figure that out.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was really one of the reasons. And then once I did it, and then, you know, once you leave the military, you know, I did it for 9 years or whatever. Then I ran a veterans support program because again, all of these people that were doing that left and there was nobody there to support them.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was, again, some of the finest people I've ever met in my life. It's ever been my
Sure.
privilege to meet, whether it's special forces, SEALs, or that 19-year-old standing in a corner making my patient go from point A to Germany to America.
Yeah.
It was something.
So and again, I just have to say that, you know, it's interesting to me because, you know, I'm very attuned to class, right? And this idea that here you are, working class guy growing up in New York, doing working class work, right? And that history, and you become a nurse. And I've worked in many medical settings, including being part of a solid organ transplant team as well, and then on a trauma team in a level 1 hospital. Is that nurses are the working class professionals in healthcare. Not, you know, professionals again, but I'll have a lot of respect for who nurses are, their roles, what they do, and the hustle, and just really kind of getting stuff done, you know. And so I appreciate it about you because, you know, we can talk about it complicates this idea of being a commissioned officer too. So you're an officer, but you have your history and you get commissioned, but you're still, you know, you're a worker, right? You're not just giving orders.
I had a lot of run-ins with the guys that were regular Army because I ran things sort of like, you know, when I was a cop, we worked together as a team and you had to be a team and you had to create a team. So I tried making things like, let's get baseball team together and play softball. You know, it'll be the ER versus the ICU versus, you know, radiology and stuff. Very hard to play softball in 125-degree weather, by the way.
Right.
So that didn't last too long. But you know, it was one of those things of just trying to create a team, and you know, that camaraderie that was there in the police department for me. And sometimes that's not what big Army wants to have happen. But
Well, I'll leave away. So you're really not a class traitor because you became an officer, right? So it's more
Thank you.
complicated than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Appreciate you. So, Kamal, how about you? Tell us more about, you know, following some of these questions and whatever you want to add, just about your military experiences.
So yeah, so when I did join, I wanted to go in as a corpsman, which is a Navy medic, because my mother was a corpsman. She worked in Floyd Bennett Field for many years. But once again, I wasn't able to get that job due to some circumstances prior to joining. So they tried to enlist me as radar man and all kind of stuff. But I decided to go in as a cook because that was one of the jobs that you can have and become a SEAL. So I was like, all right, I'll go in as a cook. I always like to cook. And I was really happy I did have that job. It was a really nice experience, and everybody took care of me because I took care of everybody, you know.
Right, don't mess with the cooks.
Yeah. I flew in all kind of planes and I did everything that, you know, I had a lot of perks. But I did also work with the medics on the ships and stuff, because when you join the Navy, you don't just have one job. You have your job and then you do everything else as well. So you're a firefighter, you're going on duty, you know, you're going on watch. So yeah, that was fun. But what I would say is I joined right before 9/11. And I wound up in Japan. I picked Japan because I always wanted to go to Japan. I was into martial arts as a kid, my whole life. And things were okay. And I remember one night getting out of the shower on the ship, and I was watching TV, and we saw this movie, and there was planes hitting these buildings. And we said, you know, what movie is this? And you know, we're all sitting there, we're watching it, and then all of a sudden, like, alarms start going off. That's how we found out about 9/11. Thought we were watching a movie. It was nighttime in Japan. So we really didn't click what was going on. Within a week or so, I would say we were deployed. Our whole battle group was deployed, and we went straight to the Gulf, and we were involved with a lot of the operations over there. I was never on land, but we were heavy heavily involved with everything that was going on over there. I was on a guided missile cruiser, and my particular ship was sent on a lot of side missions. So we went on a couple of missions with some SEALs, tracking some ships with nukes coming out of Korea. It was really exciting, but we deployed a lot. I was Arabic. I am Arabic, so I dealt with a lot of racism in there. And coming from New York, we're really mixed, right? So we experience racial stuff and we banter and joke, but I didn't experience racism until I went into the military. I got my head cracked and I got beat up by like my own service members on the ship, online. It was pretty rough for a little while. But I pushed through, and you know, for the most part, everybody was pretty solid as a unit. I winded up getting injured. I got my foot crushed, and I didn't. They botched a couple of my surgeries, and I came out before I wanted to. But I would say the military saved my life, because had I not went in, I don't know where I would be. A lot of my friends, they're not doing that great. When I came home, you know, so I was really happy that I had that opportunity, and they paid for my college, and it was good. But I did come home with a big alcohol problem, and it took me about 20 years to get that under control. I'm about 2.5 years sober now, so about 20 years to get that under control. One thing we do in the Navy is drink and fight. So that was a big problem when I came home.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for all that. And just for our audience, I mean, who don't know, it's not a secret. It's not talked about enough, but it certainly is well known for those who are paying attention, that racism is, you know, we can talk, right, you know, prior to what's going on in the current administration, but you know, over time, consistently up, you know, up through the current Trump administration. Again, that's what's going on there is a whole nother level, but systematic institutional racism is baked into the military, always has been, and has continued to be a chronic problem, you know, today, yesterday, years, you know, a few years ago. So it's throughout time. So it's, you know, to hear you talk about that is no surprise, and it's often talked about when space, you know, when people feel comfortable in bringing it up. So I appreciate that you did bring that up, and it's something that, you know, as I said in the presentation yesterday, and as Tom and I have talked about, is that there are 101 ways that the military can traumatize people without ever going to combat or going to a war zone. And racism, military sexual violence, and not just arbitrary things that can happen with one's chain of command, you know, when it comes to abusive types of training and disciplining, and on and on and on, pure on pure violence and stuff. So yeah.
I was absolutely baffled by it, because we're in the middle of a war zone and we're all serving on the same ship and shooting that direction. I'm with you. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm from Brooklyn. Like I didn't get it. Like, oh, you know, you're Taliban. I'm like, bro, I'm from Brooklyn. What are you talking about? Like I couldn't place it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like a lot of people, they did join the military after 9/11 with good intentions, but also with a lot of, I would say, hatred in their heart, and maybe misplaced. They didn't know where to place it. So any kind of like brown person with like bushy eyebrows and like a Arabic sounding name, you know, because I knew a couple of people. I had an Iraqi guy that was on our ship. He was from Jersey, and and his family was from Iraq. So he had it a little, he had a particularly hard time.
Sure. Yeah, that's, you know, there's a lot to say about that. Thank you for all that. Sandra, how about you? What are your thoughts on this section, and what's your
Well,
experience?
let's see. Number one, when it comes to
Well,
my
real quick,
experience,
sorry, Sandra, but Tim, did you mean to change the slide up? Because we were talking about the last one. Now it's the next one.
no,
Oh,
I
sorry.
didn't change the
No,
slide.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I did not mean I leaned on it. There you go. We're still on this, Sandra.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I joined the military because I was angry with my parents. I got grounded. And I was told that I had a choice to either live by my father's rules and regulations or get the hell out. And I was like tired of the behavior. And so I went down to the MEPS, took the exam, scored extremely high, was going to join the Air Force, but they told me there was a year wait because they had more than enough women. And my attitude was I already disobeyed my father, so I joined the Army. And I had the pleasure of serving underneath 6 presidents prior to getting out of the military.
Hmm.
So I joined during Carter and retired during the Obama administration. My military job skills were very unique because I believed in career progression and loved education. So I started off as a combat medic, went from combat medic to nursing, from nursing to food, preventative medicine, food inspection. And then somewhere along the line, I then became a biological warfare specialist. And I joined the Tiger team, and I was also a DI and an instructor during that time frame and an embedded trainer in Afghanistan. So that's it. I made it to senior non-com, which is where my life turned sideways. So long as, quote unquote, I knew my place, I was good. And once I surpassed E4, my life turned sideways. But I held my own and did very well. And my day-to-day life was generally uh, in briefings, doing research and things like that. Because I even worked at the regional vet lab and did a toxicology screening for antibiotics in milk as well. And just did really unique things, mostly medical, mostly research, and mostly doing what I do best, which is enjoying expanding my brain. I got involved with counterterrorism, worked a little bit with Homeland Security, doing casualty simulation exercises. And I would make all of the injuries, which were very realistic due to my combat medic and medical background. Then I got to work with the partnership with the Republic of South Africa. And so I got to do a lot of humanitarian in there. Wiesbaden in Germany, drug lab, Vicenza, Italy for a little bit. South Korea, I did blood banking with hematology and blood banking. So it's been all over the place. But my biggest 2 events, I forgot 5 mass cows under my belt. One of them was in South Korea when an accident, one of our choppers flew in and we had a lot of burned individuals. I did respond to ground zero 2 hours after the towers came down. Spent almost not quite a year at ground zero doing different things. And my most memorable one, I believe, is being in Afghanistan. I did preventive medicine and then I became an embedded trainer. And the respect that I learned from the people that I worked with that were the Afghan nationals moved me very much, even to the point that I was actually emotional when it came time to leave country because I felt that I had made some good friendships there and that more work could have been done. So that's where that was at. But I've worked with multiple nationalities. Uh, I did do green to go for a minute, and then once I got commissioned and I saw certain leadership, I didn't like it, so I resigned and went back to being an NCO, which made me very, very happy. And I've passed all sorts of faiths and nationalities, and I've learned that as much as in one way it seems like we're different, we have a lot more in common. And so long as you just use appropriate words and are civil, you can build great bonds. And so I have friends and universal family from basically Pakistan through the United States and all over the world because of the friendships and the interactions I did with that. My most significant service activities again and would be Afghanistan and also Ground Zero, because what our team put together, they had us training with a lot of civilians, and I remember working with Hazmat One and doing some really different things. And then when we arrived at Ground Zero, the first thing we were told was that we lost Hazmat One. And that was very crushing. And then there was a captain by the name of Moody, and there was a young lady also in the Pentagon. Carlos died, she got burnt, and then there was me standing. So that was a very surreal and very complicated situation for Ground Zero. And with all the training, we were told, oh, you're going to be in the trenches, we're going to make a difference, we're going to do this as a team. And no one was prepared for the catastrophic response of the loss of life the way it was. And that is an event that turned my view upside down, because it's a matter of, it doesn't matter how much you are trained and believe that you are prepared for, there will always be something that will flip the script. And that was a very hard mission to do, because it was a matter of being a fixer and feeling like I had betrayed those that I had trained with because I couldn't save them. Even though I know logically they were not mine to be saved, but it's just let me know that as much as sometimes you think you're trained and you're in control and you can make it work, sometimes you can't. So that was the most difficult and most eye-opening part of my career. So it became humbling, and it's still a thorn, but that's my career. But as a whole, as much as it was there, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Yeah. That's really rich stuff. And what, and you're on one hand, we refer to you as a lifer, right? Would, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And someone who spent a lot of your life in the military. But it's so diverse and I appreciate that about the first time I met you, and as you talk about it now, it's just how rich your experience is. So yeah, thank you. All right, I'm gonna say Tom for last again here, and go to Dylan next.
So I already kind of jumped the shark on why I joined the military. I was interested in computers at the time, and I had apparently a very desirable ASVAB score. I wasn't the top of the charts, but I did so well that I was very easily to land the job that I wanted. Um, and that was working with computers and networks. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. That's not a problem. We have openings for it. And I even was going to get the top secret version of that. But then Melanie got the call, and apparently she was going to ship out real soon. And they were just like, hey, you can take the not top secret version, and you can go in with her. So you guys can go through boot camp together. And in hindsight, probably not the best idea, but I got to go through boot camp with my future wife. We also got to go through MCT later on afterwards. But my job was pretty much, I was overglorified IT. They called me a cyber network operator. In reality, I set up laptops in the field and explained PowerPoints to officers. I got up to be a corporal. Most people in my MOS got up to being a corporal. It wasn't particularly that impressive. Corporal and sergeants is kind of how you got out. The day-to-day was monotonous. If I'm sure everyone could understand the idea of living in a regimented environment, back and forth doing similar things constantly. But there was always this underline of stress. We were support to an overall greater combat element, we would never see combat. We were never probably going to be near combat 9 times out of 10 unless we were standing in for a radio man. So that means really we were all trained to be able to do combat. We were all trained to be support to combat elements. And like many Marines, we would never get to be anywhere near combat, and that left a lot of us with a bad itch, so to speak. Something left unfulfilled. And that stress carried over, like the absence of being able to use violence translated into, well, we'll just make everything more stressful. We'll make you have to be more perfect. You'll have to be even harder. You'll have to prove yourself harder to be the Marine that you're never going to get to prove yourself to be on a battlefield. But that was probably the worst of it, was the fact that I was constantly felt like I was being pushed harder and into worse ways because we were never going to compare to an actual combat element. So instead they said, we're just going to look super good on paperwork instead of actually just trying to be super good at the job.
Mhm.
But that's the life of the wing, and that's the life of probably being a pogue person other than Grunt.
I was never going to say that and bring that up, but you did now. So
Oh, it's totally fine. Most people are simply that. It's just not something Marines are particularly comfortable with because literally it's in the mantra, every Marine's a rifleman.
yeah,
They make that very, very important, to the point where your rifle score probably matters significantly more than it should for most MOSs.
yeah.
But it was an interesting experience. I got to meet a huge amount of people, but I had lived around America before, but this let me see a greater birth of America, so to speak. And I had quite the opposite issue from Kamal over here, because for some reason, all of the racists were just like, ah, you're white. And I'm just like, ooh, you are barking up the complete wrong tree. And that had led to not that many altercations, ironically enough. And it led actually to these very interesting moments of learning, because the racists would try and win you over, and then you'd have to either hit the racist or talk them down. And this kind of like boiled out to a very like deep, impactful moment for me, which was I remember a fellow Marine that worked in radio by the name of Ellis. And Ellis was a good old boy from Missouri. And he came to me and he was breaking down. And the thing is, Ellis was not a racist. He was an incredibly hateful person. But he was a bigot because Missouri, super bigoted area, trailer park family, you know the stereotype.
Stereotype, yeah.
And he's crying at me, going, Damboise, I messed up. I messed up. I thought he did something. I thought something terrible had happened. And he's crying at me, going, it's like, I messed up. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I was like, Ellis, what happened? What went wrong? And he looked at me. It's like, I didn't understand. It was us. And I was like, Ellis, what are you talking about? And he's breaking down crying because he literally had a clarity moment. He literally had a come to Jesus moment. And he was just like, I didn't realize we did all of the bad things. I didn't realize that we were the ones hurting the black community. He didn't say black community. He just said black people. And it just really dawned on him. He said, it's like, Dylan, I can't go back home. My families are all racist. I can't face them. Like I didn't understand that I was part of the problem, because he was raised in a place where they just used the hard ER, and that's just how they referred to him. And then he literally realized, like, oh, that's just wrong. That's just a bad place to be. And till this day, I talk to Ellis. Ellis has never gone back home. He loves his family. He literally sends money home to take care of his family. But he was just like, no, the military taught me racism was bad.
Wow.
And I was happy to be part about Ellis's journey. And it's disheartening to hear how many people haven't gone through that journey and are still in the military and still have to fight. And the Marine Corps, I have to be honest, has a particular problem with this. And admittedly, the Marine Corps, especially from the DIs and the training, they try really, really hard to beat it out of you. And I thank them for that. Like, it's impressive the amount of effort they put into saying you should not be racist and we will perform mental and physical violence to make sure you are not racist or bigoted.
Right.
But the general violence on the internal level was probably the hardest part. Like, even when it was used in the best way and it was used for best outcome, it was hard because I don't think the Marine Corps knew how to have an off button. It was a pressure cooker. They always wanted to keep that pressure on because they wanted you to be able to act under pressure. And the thing that was crazy about that is that genuinely, it was the worst thing once you got out because I wasn't in the pressure cooker anymore. Everything that I held inside was just starting to boil outwards because there was nothing holding it in.
Mm.
But really, like those were like my big impactful experiences in the military.
Yeah.
And that really helped kind of like form the person I was afterwards because I realized like, oh, I should keep helping people. Like most people don't realize when they're messed up.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. It's powerful stuff. And there's so much more. I know it's the abridged version. We're all doing kind of an abridged version of our lives here in the military. But thank you. So, Tom.
So, Tom, starting back to when I joined the military, I joined because, like I said, I graduated in June of 2001, and shortly after 9/11 happened, and I got caught up in the sweeping rage of patriotism and nationalism that was going through the country, and felt like I had to do something bigger than myself. And Tim, I got to come clean here for a minute. I did try to join the Marines first. They wouldn't have me because I had tattoos below my elbow already.
Yeah,
So I kind of gave up on that dream for a couple years. And then we started to invade Iraq. And that's when I was watching it on TV and thinking, there's kids younger than me that are going to be going out and fighting this war. I need to do something more. So that's when I went to the Army recruiters and they took me in. Some more parts of the influence of me joining was my grandpa. He was a forward observer back in Korea. So I wanted to, hold on, Dylan, do you have your hand up for me?
I know we lost Austin Cardwell, who was a recruiter at one point, but the thing that's killing me here is like how did all these winners slip through the hands of the Marine Corps? I'll never know. Like,
by the way, they didn't let me go in the Marine Corps because I had some previous arrest records. So
that should be like the most minor credential. You're probably going to get out with them.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, there's a theme here. Yeah.
Yeah, the Marines just aren't good at recruiting, apparently. But yeah, so my grandpa, he had that history with the Army and fighting in war, so I wanted to kind of add to the legacy of the family name. And to be completely honest, too, like I said, I was a big TV watcher, and Band of Brothers came out at that time, and that was a great show that really, really made me want to fight a war. So like I said, I did join the Army. I was in the 11 Bravo, an infantryman, like Tim said earlier in the slideshow, one of the trigger pullers. And I was out 2 deployments to Iraq. So yeah, filling in the spots for the stereotypical veteran that people think of when they think of a veteran. Day-to-day life in the military for me would wake up early and go do PT. Then it was time to shave, shower, and get dressed, and then basically start the day for real. If we weren't out summer training, like on a range to do some shooting or a mock town to do some battle drills, we'd be in our barracks studying, studying up on things like principles of patrolling or the battle drills themselves to, go through and know the science behind it, I guess you could say, and just make sure that everyone knew their stuff really well. And if it was a day that we were out training, like I said, go to the range, go to the mock town, be out there all day long. And regardless of which type of day it was, the end of the day was never really certain. So being home by a particular time was almost impossible to square in on, which made family life pretty difficult. The diversity of the people that I dealt with in the infantry, I was working with other infantrymen for almost the entire time. So that was the time when the infantry was all men. So I worked with maybe 5 years I was in the Army, I worked with like 4 women, maybe, possibly. As far as like the diversity of like race and everything like that, we were predominantly white. However, if I look back and compare it to say high school, there were definitely more Black folk represented in my unit than there were in my high school itself. Latino soldiers, that was an interesting thing for me because growing up in Connecticut, the only people knew that were Latino were Puerto Rican. Get into the Army, and all of a sudden I'm meeting my first Mexican guys, my first Dominican guys, Guatemalan guy at one point. Got to meet somebody from Bosnia, from Vietnam, from Korea. So it was diverse. That was kind of a cool part of it. Got getting to meet people from other walks of life. The racism, it was there. However, I hate to say it, but back then it seemed more like it was a casual racism that seemed more like just, oh, we're just joking around. It's nothing big, which nowadays I can look back on and say, yeah, that's not a great viewpoint to be having at all, especially for, I had some Black friends that were there and just making Black jokes to them. And I'm sure they hated it, but they just didn't say anything. And I feel pretty awful about that nowadays. Socioeconomic backgrounds. I feel like most of us were from working class backgrounds, but it's really tough to piece together because it was all based on stories what you told each other. Some significant service type things. Gosh, when I was in Iraq, I was in Iraq twice, 2 tours, total of 27 months. Conducted several hundred raids and patrols. We did high value target raids to, go out and kill or capture the bad people, supposedly bad people. There was one, like John was talking about, mass casualty event that I was lucky enough to miss out on because I was sent running around to get people to go up to it when our chow hall got blown up in Mosul. And I feel really grateful that I wasn't able to make it there on time just because, like John said, like you go there and there's, God, several dozen people writhing around in pain and dying, and I did not have to see that, and I'm so grateful for that. So what did I like about serving and what do I miss about it? I love the camaraderie, the brotherhood of it. Even as a veteran, there's something special about meeting and talking to another veteran. And as an infantryman, it's more so. Like Tim and I, when we met and talked to each other and found out, oh yeah, we're both veterans. Oh yeah, we're both infantry. And immediately it felt like there was a connection. However, when you're in the Army, it feels like there's a distinct lack of freedom. Like your time with your family had to be placed on the back burner all the time just for the needs of the Army, and that meant like day to day, like I said, if the captain felt like keeping us there later for some reason, if he felt like punishing us, if he felt like if our weapons weren't clean enough, that meant staying until 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, whatever. And then if it meant going to some training thing for a month all of a sudden and leaving your family behind, there was that. There was also a tedium to the lifestyle at times. Like I said, going like when we weren't out training, life in the barracks got boring, very boring sometimes. So that was added to the tedium big time.
Thomas, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely, please do.
How bad was it when the barracks got boring?
Well, honestly, it depends. If it was, there were some times when it was just a matter of sitting around playing video games, and honestly, I can't complain about that. But you can only do so much of that. When it got really bad and you're just waiting for the time to get there to get off, then it'd be reminiscing on times past or looking forward to what we're going to do, which who was it? Was a Kamal talking about drinking and fighting. That was what we'd be looking forward to doing a lot of times, because that would be all we could do in the barracks sometimes after work. I'm trying to think back to when I lived there, and even when I didn't live there, it was more tedium than boredom, I think I would say, because of all the fact that I was repeating the same thing over and over again, repeating the same sort of studying type of thing over and over again, just to really drill into us how much, or drill into us so it would be like a second nature sort of thing.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank
Tim, if I can add something for the,
Yeah.
I don't know if whether or not people understand about also Marines being bored. One of the first 2 patients I took care of in country was a dog and the dog handler who got blown up, but then a Marine who got bit in the shoulder by a poisonous snake. And when I asked him how he got bit in the shoulder by a poisonous snake, I thought he was doing a low crawl to a building, doing something. And it was 2 Marines playing catch with a poisonous snake.
Yep.
And
That's
as the guy was standing in between the 2 Marines, the snake curled up and bit him as it went flying by. And it was always my thing of like, you just have to keep your eye on the Marines and never let them get bored.
Yeah.
When you do, things get blown up, and silly things like that, getting bit by a poisonous snake.
Yeah.
I just,
Mhm.
for those that are not familiar with the Marine Corps, you just have to.
Mhm.
Tom, just go. I want you to go with that one, please.
Well, we did have one guy in my company that for some reason one night decided to go out and try to catch some wild creature that was out there. Forget it was like a woodchuck maybe. And sure enough, bad things happened, and he had to, get some hospitalization done to get some wounds treated. But it's
Imagine being hospitalized by a woodchuck.
imagine like that happening after surviving Iraq,
Right.
That's
Yeah.
just the craziest thing to me.
Yeah, there's so many wild stories to experience. We all have just lots of stories, and especially, when we sit around and people we actually served with, we can just go on and on about the crazy stuff that happens just in day-to-day life. And
even
what's that?
even in Iraq, like it gets boring there too, of course, because it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that you're there. And on patrol, you get bored there. You have guys that were trying to like run after like some water buffalo and having them kick back and miss their head by inches. So the stupidity level goes up when the boredom level goes up. It's definitely correlated.
Yeah, and there's a lot of youthful stuff, right, that's going on that in these
Mm-hmm.
contexts, and a lot of us are
Young and dumb.
with except young, dumb, and full of lots of other stuff, right? So I think that what you're saying is yeah, the whole thing what Dylan you were saying too is that I think a lot of us what it came out to is there's so much room to make fun, and people often do, even Marines themselves make fun of each other or themselves, and the idea that I like to think that the Marine recruiters realized that I was not Marine material for those reasons, right? Of doing that kind of stupid stuff. That's a joke, just so you know, for Marines in the audience. That fell flat, but
You were too much of a critical thinker, Tim. They didn't want you.
no. So and just briefly, I wanted some context for myself too, is that I joined when I was 17, right? Graduated barely. Went straight, I turned 18 at Fort Benning, Georgia, going through infantry school, and I was active duty, and it was a really interesting. I loved every moment of it. I loved the training. I loved not only the initial training, but the ongoing training the various schools subsequently went through, as well as a lot of just infantry life. And I say infantry life because our jobs oftentimes become our kind of narrow reality of the military, right? And I was into when it was all men, right? And and in the light infantry, and as part of became part of a scout team, is that it also became more insular then. But our day-to-day, I mean, everything we did, our jobs, if you're going to say what our jobs are in the infantry, and when you get a little bit more specialized too, our jobs is to train and to have the mindset to enact violence against other people, to track people down, engage the enemy, and kill them. That's our job. We don't do anything else. We don't go to an office. We don't go anything else. Everything we do when we're not deployed or we're in the field training, we're doing all these different type of classes with each other. We're going to ranges, whatever. And so with that, it's not, the job becomes our mindset, and it becomes our identity to be killers, because that's what we do. And that's that's when it comes to infantry, special ops, and infantry, Marine, Army, whatever. And I think a lot of it gives us, I didn't really interact with anyone else. I mean, there's the people we did at, various training schools and stuff that crossed various types of, with you say with Marines or whatever, but it was, if I went to the hospital, onto the base hospital, I would interact, of course, with healthcare professionals, see this, if you needed to go to supply, or you needed to go to HR or whatever, but it was always there was always an othering, like those other people, right? There's the real with, and I guess with other MOSs or other jobs too, it becomes like, oh yeah, there's those other people doing that. But yeah, you don't mess with cooks. I mean, most cooks have been outsourced now and privatized. I know that, but still, the idea you didn't mess with the cooks. Certain people didn't mess with the riggers, and so yeah, there's a mindset that is part of our deep indoctrination, no matter what our job is. But and I think with that indoctrination, they get us young, and some of us really buy into it and really kind of live it. And then when we come out, obviously we have our process and some of the consequences of what we did when we were in based upon our training and jobs, and when executing that training. But that's why there's the infantry types tend to like to make fun of everyone else, pokes. While that's good fun, it's not necessarily fair either. I find camaraderie now in my life with anyone else who has served. And because there's a lot of commonalities between us, despite some variations in our experiences and our life when we're in. But the idea of coming out, and as veterans, as we enter into the civilian world, is that we're changed forever, right? Regardless of how we integrate, integrating our histories, our pre-service identities, our in-service identities, and then where we go with our post-service identities. So that's where I want to go to next in our conversation. Let me just... Sorry, I need to go back. Can you all see our screen?
See, you're on
I still think
18.
we're on the same one you were on
Yeah.
before.
Can you see it still?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we can
see that
it.
still.
Okay, I just got to check my view. I'm not good at these things.
Yeah, you're on slide 18.
Okay.
Also, I was having trouble typing this out, so whoever Hoffman is, the reason why you don't mess with the cooks is genuinely their access to cutlery, fire, and your food.
Yes.
And also they can control your portion size too. So if they like you can get more.
Oh, and they willed it over us too, believe me. They pretty much have attitudes, and they don't give a fuck, really. generally. So with that, let's go into this as a group. Please discuss any of all of the following. What does your veteran identity mean to you? Does it play a central role in defining who you are? And then going in, moreover, who are you today as a whole human being in terms of the integration of your pre-service, military, and post-service roles, experiences, and identities? And does such integration matter? Is this a difficult process for you? And then the last question I really want to get to as well. How have your worldviews, values shifted or evolved due to this process? So go ahead and people just jump in. It would take turns and, respectfully jump in and, talk about any, like it says, any or all of these questions.
I can start. I was going to say, it's interesting that, for 20 years from 1980 to just before 9/11, 10 days before 9/11, I was a cop. I was a homicide detective in New York City. I'm in books and all that sort of stuff. That didn't define me. What ended up defining me later on was the military service. And then my respect for the veterans that I ran into. And it also changed my attitude towards doing things. I mean, when I was in the ER, when we ran the ER and so on, my thing with whoever it was, and sometimes I would be a little bit stricter, is that if you got a casualty and that casualty has to look at you and know that you're going to save their life, I don't care if you're black, white, Hispanic, just do your goddamn job. That's all I want you to do when you get there. I don't need to get a Christmas card from you. I don't need anything else. But when that casualty comes in, he's got to know one thing, and that you're going to save his life. And we can't be bickering back and forth. We can't be arguing. We can't be lackadaisical. We have to be on point all the time, every time. And that's very hard to do in a war, especially when you get mortared like 67 times or something like that. And that sort of like translated on to when I went into work in the emergency room in the civilian world, and I'm telling people in the ER, you're going to stand there, you're going to stand there, doc, you're at the head of the table, we're going to intubate them, we're going to do this. It just changed how I perceived things. And it's taken me a long time to sort of like leave that behind. As a homicide detective, I investigated the death of infants and children and, all that sort of stuff. None of that affected me. What affected me was people getting killed in combat. And war is very unhealthy to the civilian population. It's particularly unhealthy to children. And that was one of the things that ended up staying with me. The integration part of it, it's funny when talking Kamal coming from Brooklyn. I don't know about you, Kamal, I thought it was the same way. I grew up on the Lower East Side. You'd get into a fist fight with somebody, black, white, Hispanic, Jewish, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, you had a pickup game, a softball on a slab of concrete. And well, he was a better hitter, so I needed him. And all of those things seem to have disappeared. And I don't know if that's something or just because I was older, translated to being, when you're working in an ER in a war zone or in the ICU. Look, keep your personal stuff to your personal stuff. Right now, when you're with me on this floor, in this place, you're a soldier or a Marine or whatever it may be. And I need you to function at that level. And it sort of like goes back to when you grew up, how you grew up. But it's that part of being a veteran that I find the most pride in. And part of it is because I met, as I've said before, some of the most amazing people that's ever been my privilege to either work with. I mean, some of the finest surgeons in the world, some of the bravest motherfuckers I've ever met in my life. Look, I've been shot at, I've been in riots, I've been in all this, but you've got some guy that's going out in special forces and their job is with, 5 guys to go into a town to do something. And I'm like, those guys, they've got it, but one of the advantages that I can say, and what I am most proud of, is that when I was working in Balad, we had over a 98% survival rate. And I felt that somehow a lot of the people that went out into harm's way, the trigger pullers, sort of knew the idea that if you could get me Balad alive, I'd get out alive. And I'd have a chance of surviving this. What happened later on, that's another thing. But that was a point of pride for me. And something that I will always take with me of working with people. Like Sandra said, you're in a Mascal, it's a unique experience. And when you see it and when you see it run properly and done well, it also is a point of pride. And not everybody can say that they've been part and parcel of that. And I'm very proud to say that I was part of it. And meeting people like I said, from 18-year-olds getting patients in and out of country to some of the finest medics I've ever met in my life. I don't think they call them whiskeys anymore, but I used to tell people is that I love my 68 whiskeys. Those were the medics. Those were the people that worked with me. And I am fortunate. And my NCOs, they made me look good. So I'm very proud of that service. And that's what I take away from it. Worldview, I think most of us can say the same thing. Unless you've been there, you don't really know. Thank you. And thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Can I go next?
Yeah, please.
Okay, John, first of all, they switched us to kilos. The question about does my veteran identity mean what it means to me, for the longest time until really sitting to his penance again, I used to always say, oh, it's no big deal, it doesn't define me. But the more and more I think about it, it has defined me in a lot of ways. And one of them is that, yes, I joined and did a lot of things in my service, but as I was serving, a lot of times when I want to get up and get angry, I realized that I was actually standing on the shoulders of other African Americans that came before me. Those that, especially coming back from World War II, that were literally lynched with their uniforms hanging, with their uniforms on, and that dismissal, or the fact that there were times of saying that they were not intelligent enough to do a job or smart enough or brave enough to do that job. There were times through my career, people tried to challenge me that way to find my weakness, and I learned and became a lot stronger. And then with those experiences, I learned to be more analytical and strategic in how I managed to react when I was getting those negative responses. And especially when, like I said, once I started climbing in rank and going beyond the places that they felt should have been my place to try to teach me to know my place was wherever I wanted to land. And I had to take strength with that. And so it has helped me mold to who I am. And yes, yes, racism to a point is real, but I've come to realize it's not so much as the race as the fact that there are people that are so afraid of admitting the things that I am capable of doing, even though they try to say that I was less than and they chose not to do. And it's easier to throw it on what I look like than to openly admit that they are now seeing where they're inadequate and don't want to admit it. That's just my personal view. And it's their insecurities that drum this. And then the integration matter, everything worked together and it's made me a stronger person. It's also helped me, although sometimes I get angry, to be more compassionate and empathetic and try to look at my values as a whole and realize I always make the joke, I did get the memo, the world does not revolve around me, and I do my best with all the skills that I've got. They've made me stronger and they've helped me be more analytical and more strategic in being that better me. And although sometimes there's been some disappointment, some hurts, and some things that make me very angry, I've learned to grow beyond that because I realize that if I waddle in all the bad, I'm shortening my life. And so from that standpoint, it's given me the ability now to learn to value my life, and the importance is trying to be better than I was yesterday.
Thank you, Sandra. It's really meaningful, points that you're making here, and adds a lot to our conversation.
And I like the idea of trying to use the bad to make the good happen. That's always an important thing. It's something that I struggle to do myself these days, where the bad just brings me down a lot of times instead of pushing me up to better things, I feel like. And I got to try to get that in check. So I kind of thank you for saying that, because it's putting it on my mind more right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Dylan, go ahead.
So this is Oh, I was looking through the question and answers, and this one stuck out to me. Michael Lennon. Uh, and just to try and answer your question, Michael, about what do you think joining the military so early does to people? I was in my early 20s when I joined the military, and many other people, and joined even earlier than me. To those people, we were taught for an extended period of time order and discipline, and to break down our individuality to work in a unit. We were taught to erode a piece of ourselves so that we could become something greater. We were taught the weight of violence, a glimpse into the nature of power, if we want to get very flowery language about it. But in all honesty, that was just it. We figured out how violence can be done to ourselves, and we figured out how we can leverage that violence against others. We figured out that the process of our jobs is a continuation of violence. And in men and women, I'm sure it has different effects. But in me, it very much gave me an understanding of what I was capable of. It gave me an understanding of the power as an individual that I could exert, that my ability to withstand and suffer was probably far greater than a standard civilian's now. Though I had less patience, I understood that I could persevere things because I was tested, because I was pushed. And even with what I could say was Tim actually brought up, which was a really wonderful point, it was conditioning. It was indoctrination. Because that's what you have to do. Because if you want to excel at war, you have to understand that war is an unnatural thing. And they make it natural for you through training. They change you. And that change doesn't go away once you leave the military. It follows you. You don't stop being that thing that they taught you. And even now, even after realizing, I was functionally, and many other people were functionally on some level tortured psychologically and physically in order to make them better for the military, because that is simply the most efficient way to do it. And I look back on it, and to a certain extent, I miss it. I miss the military. I miss the idea of the military, of a cohesive unit, of that understanding of strength and to be strong at that constant test. But I don't miss the reality of the military. I don't miss the weakness. I don't miss the racism. I don't miss how much infantry members hated themselves and everyone else equally, and they made fun of themselves because if I can hurt myself the most, no one else can hurt me. And that's how so many infantry members survived, and that bled out to the rest of the military culture. I don't miss the idea of really having to look out for my female Marines and my female co-workers because I knew for a fact something bad could happen to them. And it was more likely to happen here more than anywhere else. And it changed me because once I came out of the military, I could never be the person I was before because I had an understanding of violence after that. I had an understanding of how to leverage violence. And even now, as I continue to educate myself and grow as a human being, that understanding of violence has not left me. In fact, I would argue it has evolved. The understanding of violence that had become a part of my life is now a constant tool, a constant part of me that I figured out that I can use for good. And I'm not saying the military isn't good. I'm just saying violence is not an inherently good or bad force. It just simply has outcomes. And the military taught me I can leverage those outcomes if I can remain in control. And I would also argue that's a great part of the military, is a practice in control. But the idea is most lower members of the military enlisted are taught that you are a machine, you are part, you are the thing meant to be controlled. Once that's out of the military, back in the civilian world, many feel like a tool without a purpose, and that was me for a very long time. Up until I realized how I could leverage my violence into being a better person, into trying to make a better world.
Wow, I really relate to a lot of what you're saying. Thank you. Very powerful.
Can I just say, we need to make Dylan start talking last now, because following up with whatever he says, it's an impossible task. He's such a great speaker.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I cheat and read through the questions and answers, so this way I can figure out my talking points.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So,
I'll try to follow up, Thomas. I'll take it.
Good luck, my
Well,
friend.
yeah, well said, Dennis. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I identify a lot with it. Like I said, I joined very young. I joined at 19, and it kind of just happened. It wasn't out of patriotic duty. And then I got out in 2005 due to an injury after 3 surgeries, and they wanted to do a couple more surgeries, and I felt like a guinea pig. I felt like they botched the surgeries, and I won't speak much on that, but when I out processed in 2005, there wasn't much classes. I did a 1.5-day class. They gave us some information. They didn't tell us much about the VA. They didn't help with any service connection. They just let us out. And I literally went from Japan to Seattle to Chicago, a flight back to Brooklyn. And I was very resentful, and I was very injured. Had TBIs, some traumatic brain injuries, stuff like that. My foot was mangled, and now what, right? Figure it out. So I was really resentful, and it took me about 2.5 years to get to the VA. And I would say that my mother and my uncle, who are veterans, kind of forced me to go. And even when I went to the VA, it wasn't really helpful back then. It has improved a lot, and I don't know everybody else's experience, but I could definitely say it's improved since I've started going in 2007. But I really didn't identify with being a veteran. I kind of did. It kind of disgusted me just to go there and be on an army base, going to the VA or the army base next door. I was just really resentful of it. But eventually, connecting with other veterans, and through the years, it's a very important part of my identity, because veterans help me and I help other veterans. And in the military, I made lifelong friends, and I'm sure most of you can speak to this. Lifelong friends. I can go 2 years without speaking to them, and we speak, and it's like, hey, we're back deployed sometimes. Like, what, So that it's very important, my identity as a veteran. The questions disappeared, so I'm just gonna freestyle this. Yeah, the questions disappeared. So I'm just gonna go off of kind of what Dylan said. What I learned, I have a real duality to me, whereas I know I can cause violence. I know I'm a dangerous person, and I kind of value that part of me. I continue with martial arts. I do a lot of stuff, shooting. I do keep those things going, because I think it's an important part of me to protect my family, to protect people that I see being abused. All that racism and stuff, it affected me, but I don't really pay attention to it much. Like, that just made me a stronger, more resilient person. I've been through a lot, and when the going gets tough, I know that I could persevere. But I also have this real gentle, nurturing side. I'm a father. I have young children. I have to show up there. I can't be this hardcore guy all the time with all these issues. I have to let it go. And honestly, as far as traveling the world, like, coming from New York, we are very mixed racially, right? So, like, we grow up together, and we just love each other. we may make fun of each other a little bit in the foods and stuff, but I guess that just comes with it. But it was never from hatred. It was from love. So going around the world and being in different countries and seeing the way people live, I'm very grateful to be living in America. And people always tell me like this country sucks, and I disagree. I really disagree. But one thing I don't know, I don't watch the news. I barely know what's going on in the world. I barely know what's going on in politics. It doesn't matter to me. And people say, you know, you're such an intelligent person. You're very uninformed. You know, that's just how I choose to do it. My life, I need to be on a calm baseline. There's other people that could worry about that, you know. I do my push-ups in the morning, I make my bed, I make sure my household is good, and then I move on from there. I don't take on what's going on in the world and then worry about me last, you know, because I gotta be on point to improve my immediate surroundings, you know. So I'm not too caught up with politics. I'm not a good politician. I wasn't a good officer candidate, you know what I'm saying? Like I would have never made that. I just got my bachelor's degree last year and my job wants me to be a manager. I would never. They'd fire me the next day. I'm a great leader, natural born leader. I'm not a good manager. I'm not good at managing and doing what you tell me to do. But the military gave me that. You know, I have a lot of different experiences and cultivated into one like being that's like I have darkness, I have lightness, and I incorporate it all. And I know what I'm capable of, you know? I wanted to touch on one thing that you guys said though. I remember when I met a gentleman from Kentucky and he asked me if I ate rattlesnake. And he goes, "You eat rattler?" And I was like, "What the heck is that?" But you know, he told me, he said, "You're the first real life Puerto Rican I ever met in my life." And I thought that was mind-boggling. I was like,
Wait,
what?
that's the stereotype?
He goes, well, he never met a Puerto Rican. He just said, I've just met like Mexican people. And then a couple of people told me that they were like, you know, I never really met a real Puerto Rican in real life. It just, I never got that because being from New York, we're very integrated, you know, and
Yeah.
we deal with certain things, but we're blessed to, you know, we grow up eating each other's food.
We
And
barbecue snake in America. Why is this a thing for
Well,
Puerto
that's
Rican?
so that person was clearly uninformed about a lot. Thank
yeah,
you. Yeah, that's great. Well,
thank you for allowing me to be part of the panel.
it's great to have you here. I wanted to, so there was this last question that it's not up anymore. It's basically if and how your values and worldview have changed since being in the service. So Tom, you haven't gone for a bit. Do you want to?
I have not gone in a bit. Yeah, I was just about to start going with the list of questions from before. But my worldviews, yeah, they've shifted quite a bit. I'd say that before I was in the army, like I said, I was relatively apolitical, but then 9/11 happened and I started to lean towards the right. And then in the army, I was definitely right leaning the whole time. Got out for a while. I was apolitical again, I guess. But then the BLM uprisings, the COVID, the summer of COVID, or the time of COVID, all of that, and plus my education in like anthropology and social work pushes me pretty far into the left now, where I feel like I'm definitely anti-capitalist. That's for damn sure. Where I don't trust what Republicans or Democrats are doing in the government anymore. So yeah, my worldviews have shifted just a little bit.
Post-military is a hell of a thing.
It is, right? And you can look back on all the things that we were kind of misled about, to put it nicely, and it can just make you a little bit angrier and angrier. And having Tim for a professor through quite a few classes has done a bit of a number on me too. Ixnay on the Tim A.
Yeah, he's become an anarchist.
Maybe.
A bit. I joke, but other
Please
thoughts.
no.
Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It can be complicated too, right?
It can be very complicated. And like you said, I'm an anarchist. I can't even claim that because I don't know enough about anything to claim anything, you know?
Yeah.
There's only one thing you need to know about anarchy. It is the #1 government type to get a new government type.
Yeah. Yes, I grew up very, I was Utah red. And everyone was red. And I was incredibly patriotic. I didn't join the military as patriotic. I joined because I was headed to addiction and in prison. That's where my trajectory is going. So I joined the military to escape those conditions. But I was also very patriotic. And so, fast forward, my military experience really kind of gave me pause about a lot of what we do and why we do it, when it comes to foreign policy. I'm speaking specifically. So and being able to become critical of foreign policy, especially when there's high costs for those who serve, but also when it comes to the locations that we invade and occupy as well, and for what purposes, and the duplicity of what we are told as a public and even in the military of why are we going to war against another people. So
Question, Tim.
I wouldn't say sometimes that we're the anarchists, but I would say we've certainly got a healthy dose of cynicism.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Basically, it's sort of like you look at everything and you're going like, really? Not too sure. And you deal with the VA or you deal with anything in the military. I think it gives you a little bit of cynicism just to realize that maybe there's something else going on here that I'm not really aware of. And I've met people that have, part of my job was to get people into the VA system. And then sometimes you would run into them and you'd go, well, you're not really that suicidal. So why don't you come back and, then we'll talk to you again. And you're going like, who comes up with this?
People who are
Who
not
in their right
foreign.
mind would have that as their answer if you're in the emergency room and you just brought somebody in who said that he was suicidal? Where did that come from? And, it just, I wouldn't say the anarchist in the room, although everybody probably would be the first person to say no to anything that's, universal. If everybody said, yeah, this is a good idea, probably every one of us would raise our hand and go like, wait, time out. Let's take a look at this before we go any further. But yeah, I think that that's something, I was born in New York City, Lower East Side, so you're born a Democrat. That's just the way it is. But, my political views have changed quite a bit. But again, I think a lot of it is tempered with a good dose of cynicism as to why people are doing things. And that's how it's changed me.
And I appreciate that. That's very. I love how you put that. And just for the record, and for the recording and future watchers, is that the anarchist thing is a joke, right? There's no anarchist here. We're just we're just doing vet shit talking too. We kind of weed at the end at all times.
Wait a second. I think I heard the FBI knocking on my door.
That's when you start saying the Pledge of Allegiance so they don't bother you.
Right. Take it away, Sandra.
No, I agree. My preview has changed, and it's sort of ironic because my earnest turning point really hit rock bottom and hard at January 6th, when I saw those who were in uniform, formerly in uniform, doing the things that they did, and yet there was no mention of sedition or treason because you violated an oath that we have taken. And I can understand about disagreeing, but to stop something from doing its legal process out of chaos, it was like, are you kidding me? And another one that hurt me as well was when we were doing the pullout out of Afghanistan, and all of a sudden the former president said, well, we're not in the business of nation building. And that's exactly what I was told when I went into Afghanistan, that we are nation building with coin, the countering currency, and we were there to build, and me doing preventive medicine and going in and helping getting vaccinations in for both the animals and everything else, and testing water purification just for them, and trying to help them figure out where they're going to dig wells and all this other stuff, and trying to earnestly say, I'm there to actually help you and not denigrate you, then that you're valuable. And I made those bonds and thought I was doing good. And then one of my interpreters texted me through Facebook and said, why did you leave me? We've been abandoned. And it was like, that's not me. But it hurt because he was actually on one of those lists to be able to come in. But because of all the news trying to get the top line, things were done to where they were blocked from coming in, and then people that were not vetted ended up taking those seats. And it's like, what the hell? And I finally realized that we are set up in a system. It's not so much to help us, but unless we are willing to agree that we accept their illusion of help, is the only way you can get help. And that's the scary part, because there's somebody that wants to maintain a job, but they want it within their preface. And it's like, wow. And case in point, I did a break-in service and ran into trouble. I think I shared it. And I couldn't pay for my rent. And someone says, oh, they're not going to help you. But, you know, if you go in and get into a shelter, you can do it. And I go in there and I get told, well, you're educated and well-spoken, so we can't help you. You know, and then when I went to one of the Salvation Army shelters, they go, oh, but you can't get food stamps. You can't stay here. And it's like, really? And then when I went to the Department of Labor, I went for a job and I wouldn't sign it. And then next, you know, I finally signed it underneath, oh, I'm a veteran. And then they gave me a job exactly for the job that I just gave an application that I'm fully qualified for. But I had to do it under the semblance that they're acting like they gave me something. And I started realizing that a lot of the rhetoric that sometimes we're hearing and that we're biting into is just that rhetoric, and we're believing it, you know. And the same way when you say, oh, these people are taking your jobs, it's like, but the jobs these people are doing are jobs you would never do. So how can they take a job you never wanted to do? But we've gotten so tied up of worrying about what we don't have in our hand that someone else has, and we think that they didn't deserve it, so we get pissed off and want to take it away. And so, yes, my I'm sorry, I'm getting heated here. But yeah, it's just, I now realize that I have to very closely look at information that's coming out and evaluate it from all perspectives. And if I see it in this one here, try to find the actual article, or if it's a complaint about an executive order or a bill is going through, go into the congressional area and see if it's listed and read it line by line for myself and try to glean out where are the facts and then where are the spins. And if the spins and the facts match, then maybe that's a good position to push. And if they don't, then figure out how you can get to the answer and make my own decision.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And Dylan, we got 1 minute left. Can you do it?
Oh, I can do it. The thing that I really want to run down with, one, the entire thing that we are not nation builders, Japan and Germany have called, that's not the case. Two, talking about social services and how it feels like you have to play into them in order to get anything out of them. You're absolutely right, Sandra. You're not wrong. And Kamal, in all honesty, I really wish we could go more into the fact that you did feel like you had a problem, like you were treated like a guinea pig with the surgeries and everything else, because that's a huge problem with military surgeries and veteran surgeries in general, is that subpar care is considered acceptable care. And Thomas, you're not wrong in anything that you felt. And John, you make a really great point about talking about natural cynicism. And Thomas, your entire talk about being angry. But the only thing that I would really work on right here, the only thing that I would genuinely say, is the fact that Tim's entire area is correct when he says veterans are not a monolith. And I would argue that is correct, because if we were a monolith, we would be significantly more effective at being represented, at being heard, at getting care. And that if we didn't stop dividing ourselves and believing that help for others is a subtraction of help for us, we could be one step closer into actually becoming something that can get the care we need, that can be heard, that cannot be commodified. And I think a huge part of that has to be a real step in understanding that as individuals, we need to step together. But we
Mhm.
also need to understand why we are individuals. What are the ties that bind and what are those that divide?
Yeah. Well, that's quite the mic drop that we end on here.
Excellent. And
Thank you all. I've really loved talking to you all and talking with you all and getting to know you more, and some of you new, and hope to have more conversations in the future.